We don't even have the Reformation in Europe occurring and the various wars that followed the Reformation, the Counter-Reformation from the 1400s to the 1600s, that then gave rise to the liberal age. So, you know, you're in the period right before that. Yeah, what's your question?
Had there been a traditional ban on usury, so to speak?
Yeah, the whole time, yeah.
Among Christians?
Among Christians, but Jews were allowed to do that. Well, that's why, I mean, I don't want to say that Christians are good or bad on this issue. The point is that Christians are usually not very quick to part with money. They say Jews are stingy, but in fact, I don't think many Christians give up money very quickly either, because they've learned that, first of all, you're not allowed to lend money on interest, and they're not going to give money away to anyone. So I think over a long period of time, they too learned to be a little bit cold-hearted on this subject, except for charity. But I'm talking about, you know, giving someone money and expecting it back. No. Because the only person who really gets any money back from people usually is the person who lends it on interest, or something like that, or pawnbrokers, or something like that.
Were there any edicts prohibiting the borrowing of money?
Not if it wasn't from a fellow Christian, apparently. I mean, you'd have to look into this more carefully than I'm doing here. But it is a really interesting subject. It's called usury, and I think, again, Rudowski covers it pretty superficially, but he does a fairly good job, and I'm basically drawing on him with what I'm talking about here, which is why I like the book, because I think he does a pretty good job in a short, you know, space of time. But it's a really interesting subject. So, but that's a good question. Were they barred from? Why didn't they stop them from? You know, why didn't you stop the Johns from going to the prostitutes, if you want to call it that way? You know, no. Apparently, there was no ban in that direction. Only the ban in the other direction. And so, I mean, I don't think most Christian people you'll meet are very free with money. They're very, and that's why even today, you know, when politicians want to go and get money, they often go to the Jewish community to, I don't say shake them down, but to get the money. It's a long tradition. I mean, it goes way, 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 way back. It goes back 1,000, 1,500 years for the permission to, you know, allow them to stay in the country, and you know, they thought that was a good source of revenue. So politicians, and so you always hear from people, oh, the American government is dominated by this, that, and the other thing, and the Zionists or whatever. I don't want to go into the kind of rumors that you hear. Sure, in a way, there's some weird truth to it, in the sense that people learned a long time ago that you could go to the Jewish community and expect a lot more outpouring than you could in most communities. And I think that that's good or bad, however you see it. But I think it goes way back to this weird history that we're talking about. So again, the fact that they were serfs of the crown, or vassals of the king, as it were, you know, they couldn't do these. They couldn't get into the guilds, where different craftsmen were all involved in a guild situation. We have it today. Plumbers' guilds, carpenters' guilds. I mean, it doesn't mean everyone who's in these fields are a certain, you know, have a certain benefit, but we have Teamsters unions and things like that. The guilds in the Middle Ages were extremely strong, but certain groups were not able. To participate in them. So then somewhere along the line, and again, I don't have all of the information down, the ghettos started to be instituted. Of course, the word ghetto comes from an area in Italy, near Venice. Now, whether that was the first so-called ghetto, I don't know. But after a while, whatever Jews there were, for instance, in 1300s you had it in Sicily, in 1100s you had it in Cologne, in 1400s in Frankfurt, places like that, 1496 Krakow, and by the 16th century everywhere. So Jews were confined to these small areas within a town with walls. They could expand vertically, but not horizontally. The area was fixed. So therefore, the infant mortality became high. Epidemics were easily fostered, and for instance, marriages were often limited. Rudovsky does a very good job on this. And this weird thing we don't even realize, they had to wear a yellow badge. This is which Hitler reinstituted in the 1930s. They had to, that was going on until the 1500s, 16th century. And a weird kind of hat, kind of a peaked hat and a badge and so on to identify them. That's what Hitler brought back and so on. They were from money lending before, they really started to be reduced to peddling and pawnbroking, as we said. And that's when Jews got into the tailoring trade, and I told you about the dry goods situation here in the United States, and after dry goods and peddling, department stores developed too. So that was something of what the effects of that were. So anyway, things started to turn around a little bit in the Reformation. So, for instance, weird as it may seem, Cromwell invited the Jews back to England in the 1600s because he felt that England, after 300 or 400 years without Jewish presence, had lacked a certain economic development that this brought. And the same thing happened in places like Denmark, but these were mainly now Protestant countries. Finally, you have the situation of the Schutzjude, The Schutzjude. And that literally means permitted Jew. The Jew who was permitted to reside in a country. And to be permitted, you had to pay a license fee of some kind. So you really had to get permission from the